the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the BrockvMac Legendary Rivals podcast. We're doing a Mac cast today. Boy, I'm getting a little punch drunk because I've got to meet so many new people, especially on the McMaster side. And we are joined today by Mark Bevilacqua, which is a mouthful to say, but hopefully I handled that all right. Mark, welcome to a Mac cast, and why don't you tell everybody what you're up to these days? Because I'm sure that 25 years goes by very quickly for a lot of people.
Yep, I've been teaching in the Durham Catholic School Board since university. So right out of university, I went to Teachers College and started teaching in the year 2000. So I've been teaching 24 years and got about 7 left until retirement. And I'm at right now. I'm currently teaching grade 7 at St. Luke's in Whitby.
Wow, is it a little bit like a prison calendar? Are you putting X's on the calendar as you count down?
Some days it can feel like that. Yeah. Since I moved to St. Luke's is a great school in North Whitby, and the sports there is unbelievable. We've put a lot of big regional banners on the wall in the last 3 years since COVID ended, and we restarted the sports. So that makes things go a lot easier. And when you're dealing with great kids all the time, and kids who are really into getting good grades, and of course I'm big into the coaching. So when you have kids who are big into sports and really want to achieve in sports too, it makes it most days makes it pretty fun.
There's this great marketing book called Purple Cow Theory by Seth Godin that points out that out of a herd of cows, one of them is purple. That's how you stand out. I'm feeling a lot like the purple cow because everybody else is coaching in some form of coaching, mentoring, that kind of stuff. Do you enjoy the coaching aspect, and what sports are you coaching?
I love it. I coach. People always tell me I coach too much. I start in the fall. I'm usually not involved in cross country too much, but usually wind up going at least one of the days, whether it's the regional or the big final at the end. Flag football, I coach the defense for our school. We've won 2 of the last 3 regional championships, lost in the final this year. Volleyball, I coach boys volleyball, intermediate. Senior girls basketball, we've won 3 regional championships in a row. I coach that. We play it's a bit of a strange form of handball. I coach that. And in the spring, I coach soccer, and I'm the lead guy on the track team also. So I got my hand in pretty much everything. And I also, I'm up until this year, I finally gave it up because it was getting to be a bit much. I'm also the coordinator for the entire school board for soccer up until this year.
Wow, that is, you need, if this was a business card era as opposed to an email signature, you'd have 20 of them.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Just go from one to the next. One sport ends, and then because we make it usually at St. Luke's, we make it right to the end. I basically, as soon as the one sport ends, permission forms are going out for the tryouts for the next one, pretty much.
Well, we're going to come back and see whether you picked up anything from, Henry and Don and Billy Newton as we kind of go through your McMaster journey and kind of catch up between now and then. Why don't we start with before that, though, when you were, very young. And where did you develop a love of sports, and what sports, where did you grow up, and what sports were you playing?
I had a bit of a journey. So I was born in Caperell, Ontario, which is about maybe 40 miles north of Sudbury. And my family there, my love of sports came from my dad. He loved sports. Him and his brothers were up in Sudbury. It wasn't baseball. They played fastball. And my dad played on the Caperell Mazookas, and they won. I think in about a 15-year span, I think they won 10 Ontario championships. My dad was kind of a utility guy. His older brother Tony was the starting right fielder and a number 5 hitter, and his oldest brother Ezio was the ace pitcher of the staff, and was known as one of the best pitchers in Canada. Actually, he was kind of the driving force as far as sports goes for the family. But all the brothers love sports. They watch sports all the time on TV, and like I said, they're very involved in playing, especially fastball up in Sudbury. After that, I was only about 3 years old. I only stayed in Caperell till about 3 years old. My dad was involved in iron mining, and the mine closed. So the company that he worked for had a mine up in Labrador City, and they had 2 mines in northern Minnesota. So my dad went up and visited up in Labrador. My dad was fiercely Canadian, so he loved Canada. He definitely wanted to stay in Canada. And he went up to Labrador City for about a week and visited, and came home and said to my mom, "Barb, we're moving to Minnesota." Because I think he went up in like May or something, and there was probably still 4 feet of snow or something. He's like, we're not going there. So I wound up in Hibbing, Minnesota, from age 3 until high school. So that's where I learned. I got involved playing organized baseball, hockey, and football in Hibbing, Minnesota.
Yeah, any reflections about the differences between life in Minnesota, which is probably between it and New York State, very Canadian, very Canadian-like states, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
But any reflections on growing up in the U.S. as opposed to that might stand out to a Canadian?
There wasn't a lot because, like you said, they always kind of say like Minnesota's pretty much Canada, anyways. And we were in the northern part. We weren't even near Minneapolis, so it was basically like if I would describe where I grew up, it would be like Muskokas. There were lakes everywhere, small towns, no big cities, and growing up there, as far as being an athlete, was fantastic because everything seemed to revolve around amateur sports. You had to drive 4 hours down to Minneapolis to see a professional sports game, so you didn't wind up doing that too often. So like our arena for high school hockey was the big thing there. I don't know if you know anything about Minnesota high school hockey, but our rink probably held about 3,500 people, and it was packed every night for high school hockey. We actually had, just so we could get tickets, and like I said, my dad loved hockey. We of course, when you live in a town of 15,000 people, the kids on the team, them, through the neighborhood or through athletics. So we actually had season tickets, like you'd have season tickets to a professional sport. We had season tickets to the high school hockey team, which sounds, for the GTA area, sounds crazy, but yeah, we actually had season tickets to high school hockey, and for the state tournament, which was huge. I mean, it was bigger for a Hibbing kid. It was bigger to play in the high school state tournament for hockey. That was the bigger goal than making it to the NHL or playing pro hockey or anything like that. They'd pack the arena 17,000 people for the high school hockey tournament. So it was insane, and like I said, everything was wrapped around sports. We used to have kids coming over from the junior. When I was playing junior high football, we played at the high school field, which is about a 10-minute walk, and you could see the kids filing. Like, they would come and watch us after school, hundreds of them filing over from the junior high to the high school and filling the seats at the football stadium to watch us play 7th grade football. So it was an amazing experience as far as that goes.
That's pretty cool, and that is a big cultural difference, I think, between Canada and the U.S. Although like our local hockey rinks are pretty jammed, but I don't think to that extent. What position did you start in? In terms of your baseball playing, and were there any coaching or experiences that started to shape your love of that game?
Yeah, my dad was my first coach. We had the little league system in Hibbing, so my dad was my little league coach. I started off because I mean, comparatively speaking, we played 3 years of little league. So I was one of the smaller guys on the team when I started. So I wound up at third base, but I very quickly turned into a catcher, and I played catcher for my second year, third year of little league, and then it got a little bit crazy. I was playing senior little league baseball catcher. We also had school baseball, so I was the seventh grade catcher. And then just because of the way the system went and how things were higher up, we had an outstanding high school catcher. I remember the name still, David Leathers. I think he played some college ball down in Kansas. Then the B squad catcher his name was Chad Bockham, who I played Little League with also. He was two grades ahead of me. He actually played pro in the Twins organization. He was supposed to be the catcher on the B squad because he was only in ninth grade, but he was so good he played first base on the A squad, which meant the eighth grade catcher moved up to the B squad team. So I was catching for the seventh grade and the eighth grade team at the same time, and the senior little league team. And I actually kind of got burned out on catching a bit. My legs were getting messed up, so moved back to third base. So that's sort of where I started when I was very young. Bounced back and forth between those two positions. But yeah, and as far as the coaching goes, my dad was not only my coach, but we also had our own private sessions, my brother and I, where my dad would take us and we'd go for about 2 hours. And it was not quite a Hank Romanowski session, but close. So we do about half an hour of ground balls. We do about half an hour of fly balls, and then I'd hit for about half an hour. My brother would hit for about half an hour, and then we go to McDonald's for milkshakes. So that was our probably 2-3 times a week, our little side session on top of all the baseball we were playing on top of it.
Wow, that is it's pretty dedicated. And if Don Graves or Henry would have known that little magic trick, they would have bribed you with McDonald's milkshakes all the way through. I think Leathers is the greatest name for a catcher I've heard in a good long while. That's amazing. Mark, how did you end up, you're going to high school in the U.S., your family's based in Minnesota. Probably at that point, little insight that you'd end up back in Canada. What led to you being back in Canada?
Yeah, the iron industry and steel was kind of going down in the sort of mid to late 80s. Lots of plastics coming in and stuff, and the iron wasn't as pure as it used to be coming out of the ground in where we were in northern Minnesota. So mining kind of focused elsewhere, and my dad saw the writing on the wall, so he started looking. When I was in about grade 6, he started looking to come back to Ontario. He was from Sudbury. My mom was from Oshawa. So they started looking around at that point, and something finally clicked that he really liked. And he wound up working in Burlington for a company that made catalytic converters for cars. And we wound up in Dundas because the strange thing was because it was my parents thought it was pretty similar to Hibbing, and they really liked Hibbing, and they thought Dundas was similar size, and thought it had some a lot of the activities that I would have been involved in Hibbing they would have had there too. So the decision was made. They found a house in Dundas, and we wound up in Dundas, Ontario.
And did you end up going to finishing off high school in Canada, or at that point are you applying? Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you remember was it hard transitioning back? Did they recognize all your your high school credits from Minnesota?
Yeah, everything was good. There was no issue transferring, getting into the school system. Everything was pretty smooth. Hibbing was known as, you sometimes hear like in the States, the education system isn't as good and that sort of thing. Hibbing's was outstanding, and I stepped right in. I was in a lot of cases, I felt like I was kind of ahead of the curve a little bit, and I was like, I already did this, and as far as algebra, I was like, I already did this stuff. I already know how to do this. So for me, it went very smoothly, the transition.
It's great. And do you remember, the three universities you applied to, and what you were thinking from a where I'm going to go standpoint?
Yeah, my mom was a teacher. Right from probably when I was in maybe grade 6 or 7, I was like, I want to be a gym teacher. I had a couple of gym teachers I really liked in Hibbing, and I felt that was a spot for me. My uncle was a principal, and he, when I was in high school, was like, there's no jobs. You got to find something else. There's no jobs in teaching. Forget it. Pick something else to do. So, I was kind of interested in business, so I thought that might be a good idea. And I sort of always had geography was always my big thing. Like I had, and it was based on sports. I loved figuring out where the teams were located within the country and why the hell are the Braves in the National League East. And the Cubs are the Braves are in the National League West, and the Cubs are in the National League East. Like I couldn't figure these things out. It was always interesting to me to try and figure that stuff out. So geography, the three things I applied to Laurier for business. Guelph, I applied to economics with co-op, and McMaster, I applied for geography and environmental sciences. And it's funny, I'm thinking of the question that you've been asking, like, so why did you choose Mac? And the answer is I didn't. I went to Laurier for 2 years. So I went to Laurier. It was a smaller campus. I was told this was by my favorite high school teacher, which was probably the worst advice he ever gave me. He said, like, go to Laurier, smaller school. McMaster, you're just a number. They don't care about you. You're just a number. And in actuality, I found the exact opposite. I found at Laurier, because it was so business minded, that it was kind of there that you were just a number. And there wasn't any talking or dealing with. It was like the assignment's due at this time, whatever. The box is closed. There's no excuses. That's not the way it works in business. And I felt it very cold. I also felt at Laurier that I couldn't deal with the students anymore, because and you can tell me too if this is a business thing or if it was a Laurier business thing. I don't know, but I'd be playing like a video game or watching TV or something, and the guy down the hall who's in the same program, we had most of the same classes as me. He'd be like, you should be studying. We got a test in 2 days. And I'd be like, I got it under control. Like, I'm good. And he's like, you should be studying. Like, don't watch TV. Like, you go study more. We got it under control. And then he would actually come back to me and say, like, what'd you get? I got 85. And he would say, and this wasn't just him. Just one guy was typical of the Laurier business student at the time. He would come back and say, I got 87. I told you should have studied more.
It's a unique scenario. So just like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon that go on here quite a bit. I also applied. My three choices were Western for business, Laurier for business, and Brock. And Western, you had to take 2 years of common study before you could apply to business school. So I was not keen on that. And I was all set to really go to Laurier, and then I went and did a campus tour there. I met some of the people from the business faculty and thought, I don't know, there's something seems a little bit falsely intense, and I don't think I'm ready for that intensity at that time I was 18 years old. So, but it's funny in retrospect. My daughter now goes to Laurier and quite enjoys it, but she's not in the business program. And she said, the business program seems to come with an immense amount of pressure. And I think that there's a pressure and a competitiveness that is falsely injected into those students because business these days, in particular in a more modern setting, is really about trying to keep the pressure off so that the best work can be done, as opposed to ratcheting it up so that you end up with burnout and the rest of it. So did you find the program burnt you out a little bit? And what made your decision to transfer over to McMaster?
Yeah, I never thought of it as burnout, but maybe that was what it was. But like I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I'd had enough, and I was like, I gotta make it some kind of change. So it was strange because the year before, or like my last year at Laurier, the team was coming to Laurier. The baseball team was coming to Laurier the next year. So I went through tryouts. I went through everything. Talked to the coach, and the coach was like, "Yeah, you're gonna be here." There was another guy. I think he was a transfer student from somewhere in Michigan. And he was coming in, and he was like, "You're gonna be my middle infield and that type of thing." And like, this sounds good. And I was starting to think a little bit more positively about it. But then talking to a couple of the guys that I knew from the McMaster team, and I was just like, something's calling me back to McMaster. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel even though it was kind of walking into the unknown, and I had heard that Mac was really good, and they had some outstanding players, but I certainly wasn't going to be walking into a starting role at McMaster like I was at Laurier. But I was just like, I think I need to go. So I made the decision. I think it was like right during exams. So things were positive for me with the Laurier baseball. I was doing okay in school, but I was just like, nope, I'm going. That's it. And I got the transfer process started, and it was probably sometime in May, I had basically officially transferred to McMaster, and I just changed I wasn't in business anymore. I was back taking what I originally had signed the application to take. I was taking geography and environmental science at McMaster starting in year 3.
Wow, it's quite a journey. So you're ping-ponging all over North America. You're switching schools. Do you remember your first contact with a coach? I mean, you knew some of the players, obviously. Mm-hmm. Do you remember your first contact with the coach? Was it with Don or Henry?
I think it was with Don. I'm quite sure of that. And I was, again, it was kind of weird. I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think I went to the first couple of practices. And then I was off to I was playing Dundas Chiefs senior OBA at that time. And we were off to the OBA tournament. So I missed that whole week. Basically, it felt like this was the longest tournament in history. Looking back on it, it felt like we were there for like a week. I thought an OBA tournament was like 3 days, but it felt like we were there for like a week down in Sarnia Court, right? So I felt like I missed a good chunk of the sort of tryout process and the first practices, and the first thing I really remember was going, and I literally was driving back from Sarnia, and I knew we had a practice at Volunteer Field in Dundas, and I stopped there, and the practice was over, and I basically got a uniform, and like a day or two later, we were playing at the Sky Dome, and that's really all I remember about my joining the team. Was I think the guys who were already in the team who knew me kind of said, like, this guy's, you don't need to try this guy. Like, we can figure out where he's going to play later or whatever, but he's going to be on the team. And I think Donnie just trusted the guys, who told him this, and I was there. And like I said, I was my first action was, I think it was about the third or fourth inning at the Sky Dome. I replaced Doug Lunny at shortstop, and I was playing shortstop at the Sky Dome.
Yeah, so you guys have been playing U of T, and do you remember what it was like playing in the Sky Dome? And did it feel, like you made the right choice? Because Laurier obviously did not play in the Sky Dome that year, and I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the base, but it was just everything about it just felt right about McMaster, and just all the things that didn't feel great about Laurier they just kind of all were better. I like the campus better. Like I said, the teaching staff seemed more friendly there, and you were seeing it was obviously bigger campus, more students. I felt like at Laurier was back in high school again, and it was just like, yeah, I saw you in that exact same spot yesterday and the day before. It was like the same people in the same places every day, and it was just like, I think I need more than this. So yeah, just everything felt good. Playing in the Sky Dome was surreal, I guess. It's just a couple years after the Blue Jays won the World Series, and I remember going to the change room, and the change rooms were behind the outfield wall, and I remember the first thing a couple of us did when we went out there, we did the run in and banged off the outfield wall just to see what that felt like. But Devon White banging into the wall and trying to make a catch. So and then the other, I had never played on artificial turf before, and that was a very strange experience, especially to be taking ground balls off of the rug. It felt like the ball actually was speeding up as it came to you, which makes no sense. But the topspin on the ball and the fact that you're basically playing on concrete with a little bit of rug on top of it was really really weird, I thought. But it was a great experience. I loved playing that game, and we'll always remember that for sure.
It's amazing. And, what, do you remember you're starting to, were you commuting in, or were you living on campus at McMaster? And, what were some of your early friendships on the team? Were they people that you previously knew, or, did you start to develop some different relationships as a result of playing on the team?
Yeah, there was, I moved back home. So I was living at home again, and it was, I don't know, it was about maybe a 10-minute drive from campus. So instead of paying money to live off campus or whatever on my own, I put money into a car, and I bought a car instead, and just lived out of my parents' house. And yeah, it was just a lot of the when I first started there, was the guys that I sort of had already known, the local Hamilton guys that were on the team, that were sort of, more friends with it at that point. Brad Arms, who was a pitcher, he sticks out to me as a guy. He was, I'm a bit of a shy guy. He was very outgoing, so he kind of always dragged me along into conversations or going out with the guys and that kind of stuff. So I would say he was kind of the guy who, sort of made me fit in, I guess, with the rest of the team.
Oh, that's good. And do you have any memories of this other than playing in the Sky Dome? Like, how did your season progress? And, were you seeing lots of time? Were you backing up? Like, what, in what positions did they play you in?
Well, it was a struggle, because I'd always kind of been this way ever since I sort of moved back to Canada. I was sort of the best example, like the prototype of the jack of all trades, master of none. I could play any position. I wasn't outstanding, I don't think, at any one of them, but if you need me to play center field, I play. In high school baseball, I played center field. Why? Because we didn't have a center fielder. So I played center field. For the junior team, I played second base. As I just told you for a few minutes ago, for the senior Chiefs, it was an older team, so they didn't have a guy really who, I guess, had the speed or range to play shortstop. So on that team, I played shortstop. So I just, and of course, the positions that that I played, I was like, I'm not beating out Brad Reason for second base. Like, probably nobody in the province at that time was beating out Brad Reason at second base. Like, there's just it wasn't going to happen. So you kind of had to look, and I kind of scrapped my way in and got playing time where I could. I played at McMaster. I played, of the 10 positions you can play, I played 7 of them, and I could have played an 8th, but I kind of chickened out. It was actually in '96. We had clinched first place. I'm pretty sure, because we had the home in the playoffs. We were home against Brock, so we must have come in first place. It was the last game of the season, and Don Graves came to me. We were playing Guelph for our last 2 games. So when we won the first game, I think that clinched it for us. So Donnie came to me and said, "You're starting in the second game." And I said, "Okay, well, what position am I starting at?" He's like, "Pitcher. You're starting pitcher." And I was like, and Hank threw batting practice, and when he wore out, I would finish. So I guess that's why I got the nod to start pitch in the last game. So we went out to the bullpen, and I started warming up. And the catcher at that time was his name was Moriali. I can't remember his first name. His brother was a CFL player. I remember that. So I'm throwing to him, and I'm like, "Moriali, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I might embarrass myself out here." Like, I'd only pitched. I would maybe come in relief 2 times a year. Like, that was my pitching experience. I had never started a game in my life. My total innings pitched probably in my entire life was, I don't think it was 10. It was probably less than 10. So Moriali just said, "Well, I'll pitch, you catch." So I said, "Oh, okay." So we just split it in the bullpen, and I put the equipment on, and he became the starting pitcher that day. And I had done some catching that year. Got back behind the plate again, and so I caught that game, and Moriali started on the mound for that final game. And I'm looking back at it, at this point I kind of wish I would have taken the start and maybe got a third of an inning pitched and faked an injury, and at least had a pitching line for my university career.
That's amazing. Everyone's kind of got a Henry Romanowski story. Do you have one of your own that sticks out, just in terms of your dealings with Hammer and Hank, as he's known now?
Yeah, well, the ones I've heard on here are, of course, the classics. So I'll throw a new one at you. It was the national championship game, and nobody ever brings this up. I wonder if it's like people forget, or if it's just kind of, I don't know. But we were that was a 7-inning game, and it was the 5th inning. We were losing 5-1 in the 5th inning of that game. No, I've never heard anybody bring this up. And going back to the reunion or listening to the podcast, there wasn't any panic on the bench or anything. Like, there was there might have been some. I know in me there was internal panic. Like, oh my God, like, we made it this far. We kind of breezed through the round robin of the national championship. And now we only got 3 times to hit left. We're losing by 4 runs to Laval, they were a very good team. But nobody. If anybody else was feeling this, nobody was saying it. We were all very calm and relaxed. And then we had we'll call it a rain delay, but it was freezing rain. It was November 1st. It was not a nice night. So we had a freezing rain delay in between in the middle of the 5th inning. And the Laval team, I don't know what they were doing, but I remember talking to whoever I was sitting next to on the bench, saying, like, what the hell are these guys doing? They were out in front of the dugout doing some, like, hybrid of the Mr. Baseball, Tom Selleck, like, calisthenics mixed with some, like, Hungarian folk dance or something. They were doing some weird nonsense in front of their dugout. And we were kind of talking, like, what are they doing out there? And Henry Romanowski went berserk. Like, what the hell are these guys doing out here? He just lost his mind. And that was sort of the one thing. And I'm sure he was just trying to get us, pumped up or whatever. I don't think we needed it, because, like I said, seemed to be no panic in our dugout that we were losing. But I think it was his sort of motivational tactic, but he did not like that he felt that they were showing us up, I guess, that they were doing some kind of weird dancing in front of their dugout during this rain delay. So anyways, that was just one other thing that sticks out in my mind about him was just him walking back and forth up the dugout, just, are you going to take this? Or, and going on and on about in this dance. And
I think
as the story goes, we got 3 runs in the bottom of the 5th, and to get within 1, and we got 2 more in the bottom of the 6th, and we went into the 7th with a 1-run lead, and we wound up holding on to it. So I don't know if the tactics worked, but certainly the result was the right result for us.
Yeah, I think Henry is I might be related to him in some form or fashion. It's funny sometimes how the smallest little thing that your opponent does that's unconscious, they might not even consciously do it, but it sets you off. And if you're the type of people that perform based off of emotion, it'll fuel you to some pretty intense things. And I think it's probably if you give someone anything under those circumstances, and they talk all the time in sports culture about don't give anyone bulletin board material. Yeah. It can really be used as it just gets pulled out at the exact wrong time if you're the team that provided it, and the other team just steamrolls you. It gives them some momentum, which, a lot of analytics people don't believe in the concept of momentum, but the truth of the matter is it exists. When you've been on a field, that momentum exists. Mark, how long did you play at Mac, and is there anything that you remember that maybe is your own private memory that you'd like to share with your ex-teammates and probably some Brock folks that are that you remember during the season, like a moment or getting down a bunt or anything like that, where you kind of keep that one in the treasure chest?
Yeah, so I played there for 3. I played there for 3 years because I had my 2 years that I should have finished university. If you're going to finish in 4 years, because of the transfer process, I lost a couple of credits, and it just didn't match up. So I had to take, I either had to take some summer courses to finish up if I wanted to finish up on time, or go back another semester. And as it turned out, when I was in what should have been my 4th year of university, my uncle came, and it was at Christmas dinner, and he said, "Gee, are you still interested in teaching?" And I said, "Well, I haven't thought about it in about 3 or 4 years, but yeah, I am." And he said to me, "Well, things are really opening up now. So if you want to get into this, like, now is actually a perfect time for you to get into it." So, I hadn't thought about the process of applying for Teachers College at that point. I don't know if I would have gotten in, because I don't know how much experience I had at that point that I could put on the Teachers College application. So at that point I kind of decided I'm going to A, go to Teachers College. I'm going to B, go back to McMaster for first semester of my 5th year, and then to get a bunch, as many volunteer hours and that sort of thing, working with kids as I could to boost up the Teachers College applications. So that's why I went for the 5th year. And then, I got lucky. I worked for the Halton. There was a program. I guess they were anticipating they were going to need more teachers. So that last half of the year, my 5th year, I worked for the Halton School Board. And I was in a classroom. I was in a library at a school. Actually, I designed the website of the school and worked with kids coming into working on the computers and stuff. So that's sort of how that 5th year went. As far as something I remember my first hit for McMaster University. I was an excellent bunter. And we had I think we had guys on first and third, and this is something that nobody else is going to remember this but me. We had guys on first and third. We were playing Western, and I thought Billy Newton gave me the bunt sign. I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to do it, whatever. And I thought it was Bernie Arbor Stadium, and the grass is nice and thick there. And if you can push it past the pitcher and get it in that sort of Bermuda Triangle between the second baseman, the first baseman, and the pitcher, not only am I going to get an RBI here, but I might be able to get a hit here. And sure enough, I had done it before 100 times at Bernie Arbor, playing there a lot in junior, and I did it perfectly. And I pushed it past the pitcher. First baseman came over to field it, and I just, I beat the pitcher to the bag. I got my first MAC hit, my first MAC RBI, and the ball went about 18 feet.
But a perfect 18 feet. I could tell you, as someone who can't field their position, that particularly when you're left-handed, and I fell hard to the third base bag. Someone who could, pull the bunt with them down the line, between the pitcher and the first baseman, that was death for me. So, people like you would have been wearing a ball in the ribs after when the next time you got up there. Mark, so you're teaching, you got yourself a little placement. What brings you back to Durham, and kind of how do you end up teaching in the Durham Catholic School Board?
Well, and here's something too, Mike, that it might be interesting. I might be the only guy who is involved in this. I'm sure I'm the only guy who's involved in our reunion here who has this. I have a degree from Mac and Brock, because I did my teacher's college at Brock.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, Brock had a campus in Hamilton. So I applied to, I think, 5 or 6 different teachers' colleges. And, again, I was at home. I was putting a lot of money in the bank through my summer job. And, my parents didn't charge me rent or anything or make me pay for food. So I was saving a lot of money, and I thought, if I can get into the Brock campus in Hamilton here, that's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, I did. And it worked out from there. And as far as how did I wind up in Durham, my grandparents lived in Port Perry. And like I said, my mom was from Oshawa. I have an uncle that lives in Pickering. My other uncle at the time lived in Whitby. And he always said, he was with the Durham district, the public school board in Durham, and he was always like, "Go to teacher's college. I'll get you a job. It's no problem. You get out here, we'll get you sorted." And as it turns out, it was Christmas time during my teacher's college year, and the first week back after Christmas, in the Brock gym, all the school boards, set up their little Bristol board thing, and they would have people there, and you go, it was like a job fair or whatever, and you went and talked to the different school boards, and Durham Catholic School Board said, let's go for an interview. And I was like, I'm not really ready for this, but let's go. So yeah, I went up to this, I don't remember what, if it was, are there offices in the gym there? I don't know. I felt like I didn't really go anywhere. But I was sitting outside of an office and going in, okay, go in. So there was 2 principals there and had an interview, and thought it went okay, reasonably for my first interview, which I was not really prepared for at all. And they said, when I was done, they said, we want you to go across the hall now. There's the superintendent across the hall. We want you to talk to him. And I walk in, and he was kind of an interesting guy. The superintendent, he had his feet up on the desk at this, empty office at Brock University, and leaning back in the chair, feet on the desk, he had cowboy boots on. I remember that too. And I walked in, and I obviously looked nervous, and his first couple of words were, "Relax, you're hired." So that was, yeah, it was like, January 10th, I still had 4 more months of teachers college, and I already had a job. So I was the first one at the Hamilton campus of Brock to get a job, and they had a little thing for me there. I was kind of like, oh God, this is a bit much, but yeah, actually the first one in the class there to wind up with a job, and it was basically I had I think he said you got 2 weeks to decide. If you decide yes, you got to come out to Oshawa and sign the paperwork. So I figured, why not? Let's do it. And I've been here ever since.
Wow, that is some cowboy way of operating right there, but it's pretty crazy. And you may be the only person I know that is carrying a degree from both Mac and Brock. It's given the eligibility rules or that weird transition time in between OUA and SEBA rules, you could have played maybe for both teams. That would have been
I probably could have, but like I said, because I was at the Hamilton campus, there was just I wasn't driving out to St. Catharines every night for practice.
For sure. What do you recall of, do you remember the teams that you guys had an intense rivalry? Speaking of Brock and Mac, knowing that those two teams are like cats and dogs, do you remember any of the intense rivalries from your playing days at Mac?
Pretty much Brock was it. Like there was one other time where things got a little heated. I'll tell you about that in a second. But it was the whole season for us was about those Brock games. Like they were circled on the calendar. You knew exactly when those were, and all the lineups, lining up the pitchers. Like everything was about Brock. Everything was about Brock at that time. We knew that unless one of us screwed up severely, like it was going to come down to Brock versus Mac. So like it was that's all it was about. The one other one that I remember was against Laurier, and Rob Pino, who was I think he was the same age as me, maybe 1 year older, but he seemed like he was like 35 years old. He had this presence about him where like you just is an intimidation really, and he wasn't a big guy, and but he had this big deep voice, and like he knew how to use it effectively when he needed to. So he was pitching against Laurier, and he felt like the guy on second base was relaying signs to the guy at bat, and he walked right off the mound and got right in the guy's face. And again, we thought we got to get ready here. This is going to turn ugly. And he went to the guy on second base, put his finger right in his face, and was gave him hell about relaying signs. And this guy was like visibly frightened. He was like, no, what I didn't. And it was just, and again, I don't know, Pino was for surely shorter than me, and I'm not a huge guy. I'm only 6 feet tall. Like Pino was probably maybe 5'10", but he just had this intimidation factor about him, and like the guy was on second base was scared, and it just died down, and we just continued on. But that's as close as I remember in university baseball to something actually starting up there. Was that walking up to second base and yelling at the guy on second base.
Yeah, it's pretty gutsy. It's interesting. And so you take the job in Oshawa, Mark, and what was your first school like, and what was it like all of a sudden now teaching, and did you get into coaching right away? What did that look like? It'd take a couple of years to kind of get your feet under you, and tell me a little bit about your first couple of years teaching full time.
So I worked in Pickering, just off White's Road, at a school called St. Elizabeth Seton, and it was an enormous school. It was a new school. It was only a couple, maybe 3 years old. We had when I started there, we had about 800 students. It grew to over 1,100 students at one point. So it was big, and of course, with that many kids, just by sheer numbers, you were going to be good at sports because we were playing other schools. You know, we had the grade 7 and 8s. We had more grade 7 and 8s than they had kids in their entire school for a lot of the schools we were playing against. So, it was kind of automatic we were going to be good. Pickering was, and still is. They're produced some pretty good athletes out of Pickering. And we had I remember my first, I think this is the way it is for all teachers, but my first couple of weeks, I was just like, my life was going to work, teaching, preparing for the next day, and going to sleep. And that was pretty much it. But if you're going to survive in teaching, you quickly figure out how to do it. And by the end of the first month, I didn't get involved in the fall sports because I was a bit overwhelmed. But by the end of the first month, I kind of had a good groove going, and I took the intermediate basketball team that first year, and we won Pickering. Then we beat the Ajax winner, and we wound up in the final for the school board, and we lost by 1 point to a team from Whitby. And my biggest memories from that team were we actually had two guys who went on to play professional soccer on that team, and the one guy's name was Jamie Peters, and he played in England for Ipswich Town. So he sent me at one point a picture of himself playing against in a FA Cup game, playing against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. That this kid who I taught like 5 years ago is playing against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. And then the other guy played professionally in Finland for about 5 or 6 years. But those two guys, I mean, they were just outstanding athletes in every sport, and they were an unbelievable basketball team, and we went on quite a run there. My very first year, my very first team that I coached, making it all the way to the Durham Region Finals.
That's super cool. And Mark, is there anything that you learned from your time as a player at McMaster that the coaches would have drilled into you that made you a better coach? Like you're a pretty prolific coach at this point, so clearly you must have picked up something from Don and Henry, and then Billy, obviously, at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of just I think knowing when to push people and knowing when to sort of not, just kind of, I guess, coddle them a little bit and say everything's going to be all right, as opposed to like, get moving, like we're better than this, get moving. It's just sort of that balance of when do they need to be pushed and when do they not need to be pushed, I think was probably the biggest thing. Because all those guys, all the coaches at McMaster, the word I would describe all of them as coaches would be intense, right? They wanted to win, but they would push you to your maximum. But I think that they did a very good job of knowing how far they could push before it was too much. And all three of them there, I think, would fall into that same boat, because especially Donnie and Billy, they would, and I mean, Hank, we've heard about Hank and his 1,000 ground ball, so I mean, he would push you too, but it was really Donnie and Billy who sort of knew when to pull back and knew when to really push even more and get us over the edge there.
That's great. So Mark, tell me, you get settled into Durham. You're now coaching out in Pickering. What has there been some things that let's pretend for a minute that you're having a conversation with. I'll use Brett Gibson as an example. Maybe someone you haven't seen in 25 years. Have there been some things that were significant in your life? And we'll talk a little bit about being an educator and getting through COVID and some of those things. But are there other things that people should know that you've been up to or have gone through? Some people have gone through some pretty heavy things or some life-changing things. But why don't we kind of pull back the curtain there outside of coaching and baseball?
Yeah, it's, I think just pretty typical stuff for me. There's been nothing like overly, I don't think, overly notable, I guess, that I've gone through. Just things of getting older. People, relatives pass away. My dad had a car accident about 8 years ago now, so he passed away as a result of a car accident. Mom's health has been up and down a bit, so it's just looking after her a bit more than before, because she was hugely independent person, still is, but she still needs got to go to Walmart every now and then and buy a case of water for her because she she can't carry it like she used to, and just sort of stuff like that. But as far as I go, I've just been grinding away at teaching, and I've kind of I think I only played baseball 2 years after I finished up at McMaster. One was a little bit of a shady story too, but
How can there be a shady story in baseball? I mean, I played for a mob boss, so that's telling you all you need to know there. But how can your story be shady?
I was coaching my brother's junior team, and I think we only had 12 guys on the team. It was maybe not even that. It might only been a lot. Like, it was a very small bench. So and this was in that time period of I'm trying to be like, I coach youth baseball. I coached my brother his last year of high school. I coached his high school baseball team too. When I was trying to build the resume for teaching. So I was coaching the junior team with another guy who, and we got to Oakville and this is the Dundas junior team. So we got to Oakville, whatever that is, 45-minute drive, whatever. We realized about 10 minutes before game time, we only have 8 guys. So, and so the other coach's name was Ed Delane, and he said, "You're playing." And I was like, I'm like 23 years old, like 24 years old. Like, and he's like, we didn't come out here for nothing. Like, it's just a league game. Who cares? So yeah, I played junior baseball probably about 5 or 6 games that year, because again, we showed up, we had a couple of knuckleheads on the team, and they wouldn't tell you that they weren't coming or whatever. Maybe somebody said like, let's do this, and they decided to go do whatever instead of come to the baseball game. But we showed up here or there and with not enough guys, and I was always guy number 9 when we only had 8. So I was playing junior baseball at about 24 years old. Nobody ever questioned it. But yeah, I probably am the oldest player in OBA history to hit a home run in junior.
I think your OBA card has been revoked. Statute of limitations may have expired, though. Mark, let's I think speaking of Durham region and speaking of educators from Durham region, Brad Reeson, who we've talked about earlier, was a teacher at Dunbarton High School, and heavily involved in coaching with hockey, golf, baseball. And I've talked a little bit about Brad as an educator, but he's one of the people you would run into still on occasion in the aftermath of McMaster. What are your reflections on Brad and what it meant to play with someone like him, and more so a little bit of the drive and determination it takes to be an educator in Durham? And it's not that easy in Pickering sometimes, and
yeah, sure.
he really grinded out. So tell us about Brad.
I always say, as far as my coaching goes, and he would fall into this perfectly, if your best players are your hardest workers, you're going to have a very, very successful year of coaching. And that was what happened at McMaster on the baseball team. And he was one of the guys he was one of the best players, and he was the hardest worker. Like, he was out there because we've all been on teams where the guys are the best players, or the captains of the team. I've got too much of this and I can't make it, and they leave early, they show up late, and this kind of thing. And that certainly was never him. He was the first guy there, and he was the last guy to leave, and there was never any question of, is he taking it easy today? No, there was never any taking it easy for him. He was 100% all the time. His batting, to watch him take batting practice, was ridiculous because literally, like, you know, I mean, I remember taking batting practice and, you know, he'd foul one off back into the whatever that thing's called that's over you, or he hit every ball right in the center of the barrel of the bat. It was every ball coming off his bat was coming 100 miles an hour off of it. And just the intensity that he played with and practiced with and did everything with was, you know, just it really couldn't be, it could be matched, but it certainly couldn't be overtaken. Like, because we had, like, Craig Cooper was the same way, like, and again, that's why we were successful, because as a guy like me who didn't have the talent of those guys, I certainly had to have the work ethic, because how could you not have the work ethic that the two best guys on the team had? Like, you had to match it. And we had so many guys who, over the 3 years I was there at McMaster, they would come in, play a year, and then they'd go, right? And it would be because, well, maybe they weren't getting as much playing time as they thought. They didn't want to put in the work for, you know, playing one game out of every 4. But the guys who stuck around were, like myself, were guys who tried to do what they could do in terms of the work ethic, and Brad certainly was at the top of the list for the work ethic. And I'm sure, I mean, I don't know his teaching story, because I was in the Catholic school board, he was in the public board. We would run, I actually helped coach the St. Mary's high school team, so we would run into each other all the time at high school baseball. The kids loved him. I know that. They you know, they respected him. They loved him. I'm sure he brought that intensity and passion into his teaching career as well. And there's one thing that you can't do as a teacher, and because the kids will figure you out in about 12 seconds, you can't fake it. You can't fake teaching. The teachers who have problems are the ones who are trying to fake it. You have to want to be there. You have to want to be helping them. You have to know what you're doing, or you're going to get eaten alive. And he certainly, you know, like I said, the kids in the baseball team loved and respected Brad Reese, and that is 100%.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny. Coaching came very naturally to Brad, but it wasn't something that he initially actively sought out. He had these other pursuits. He was very much into his cottage and cottage life and, those kinds of things. But, I think he just was a natural coach, just in terms of being, projecting empathy is the one thing that I will say about Brad. He's a guy that you could talk to, and he's really good at everything that he did. He was really good at everything that he did. But his example is something that you'd love to be able to roll if we were a little more into video back in the day. This would be a great how-to video for a lot of the incoming McMaster baseball athletes on how to not only carry yourself on the field, but to also achieve your goals at school, how to graduate, and how to get the most out of your university experience, because it does pay off for what you're doing down the road. Mark, tell me some random, let's get some random things out about you that people might not know. What's your favorite sports team?
My favorite sports team is, growing up baseball, I was in Minnesota. People automatically think it was the Twins, but I lived too far from Minneapolis to get any sports teams or any games on TV for the Twins. Like, I think we'd get maybe a Saturday afternoon game. So I grew up watching WGN, coming home from school most afternoons, and watching the Chicago Cubs. So as a young lad, I was a big Chicago Cubs fan. I'm also, I love hockey. That's one thing probably that I kind of, when I was done university, kind of put baseball to the side, and up until COVID, I was probably playing between 100 and 125 hockey games a year. Now I've got it down to about 75. I quit one of the leagues. I'm not playing in the summer anymore, so now I got that down to 75. So I'm a huge hockey guy. My team in hockey is the Buffalo Sabres, and I am for NFL. Again, we love it. NFL. My wife and I do a NFL trip every year, and we go to Foxborough. We're Patriots fans, so those are the three big teams that we like. Patriots. And I'm not so much for the Cubs anymore. If I watch baseball now, I watch the Blue Jays. But as a kid, I was a Cub fan. And Buffalo Sabres, which is just for the last 10 years has just been rough.
Yeah, I could see that being a bit rough. I always feel bad for the Buffalo sports fans, obviously, having gone to school in Brock and played in Buffalo. They take their sports very seriously, and just it's repeated heartache, right? Like the most ridiculous things happen to those poor fans, and I always feel that a great growth industry would be set up a psychiatrist office in Buffalo just to deal with people who are dealing with.
It could go right next to the stand where it looks like everybody in Buffalo either gets a Buffalo Bills or Buffalo Sabres winter jacket. Like that's everybody's got either a Bills jacket or a Sabres jacket.
They fly their colors proudly, and then they have to check in for a little couch session because somehow they don't win a football game with 13 seconds left. So, and Mark, let me also ask you this. Someone is going to, at this 30-year anniversary, you meet up with your old teammates and they're going to take you out to dinner. And what's your favorite food and beverage that they could treat you to?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'm Italian. I love my Italian food. My dad was Italian, so the downside of that is that most Italian restaurants, the food is just not good. So, to be honest, like they're few and far between. Most of it is as an Italian. I remember going out to dinner when I first started teaching here in Durham, and go out to dinner with a bunch of the young guys who are teaching, and you'd go to Eastside Mario's, and I'd always get a sandwich, and you're like, why aren't you getting, like, we're at Eastside Mario's, why aren't you getting past? I'm like, because it's just garbage. Like, I'm not eating that stuff. So if you found a good Italian restaurant, if you knew of a good Italian restaurant in St. Catharines, you could take me to an Italian restaurant. But if you don't, then I don't know, maybe just
there's a very good one in Port Dalhousie called the Twisted Pig. I'm just letting you know that right now. And so that's, and like you're always better off going with someone that it's independently owned and it's, it's not a chain, I think. Yeah. Do you have a beverage of choice? Is someone going to, buy you a beverage to celebrate the, maybe one win a year from the Sabres? Because they're not trending in the right direction these days.
I'm mainly just, like, if I'm having a drink, I'll probably have a beer. Nothing too fancy. I'll just, like, Moosehead might be my go-to or something. We've been doing a lot of traveling COVID interrupted a little bit, but for the last 15 years, you get a little more established and you've got a little bit more disposable income, and we've been doing a lot of traveling. We wind up in the UK often, so I've been trying to get into Scotch, but it's you might convince me to have a Scotch. I haven't found my Scotch yet, but maybe someday we'll find that.
I think Bill Newton's going to still take a lot of abuse for his love of sipping tequila all of a sudden. So, so travel seems to be a passion. I think rather than, I think we've probably covered this with other educators. But anything that you recall from COVID that was, it was difficult on educators in particular and people who worked in the healthcare system, which is a lot of the McMaster folks. What are your reflections on that? It was not a good time for the students, obviously. And have you felt that they've rebounded at this point, or are we still dealing with some residual effects from that time period?
I think most of them have recovered fairly well. I think, me teaching, I usually teach grades 7 and 8. It'll be interesting to see those kids who were younger and sort of in that time period where you learn how to read and write. What's that going to look like when they get up to grade 7 and 8? Because, if you were in grade 1 or 2, right through the thick of COVID, like, it's, for somebody in grade 7, 8, it's easy for me to teach a history lesson or a math lesson online. That it wasn't a problem. But for somebody trying to teach a kid how to put words together and reading sentences and writing sentences, like, I don't even know how they did it. And I'm very glad that I was not teaching primary grades during COVID, that's for sure, because I wouldn't and still don't have a clue on how they did that. I had a little camera set up, and basically what, for a math lesson, what I would put on the board in math class, I had a piece of paper and my camera looking down, and I just showed them on the paper, and that's what was on the screen. So I think I had it a little bit easier than some did. But yeah, those grade 1s and 2s, and the teachers who were doing that, I give them all kinds of credit, because I would have been lost trying to figure that one out. And as far as the kids during COVID, that first spring, we were just putting work online for them and check-ins for them. By June of that year, most of the parents had messaged me and said, like, I think we're done. They just, and fair enough, like, I kept going right through, giving them lessons every day. But fair enough, it was hard for them. The first full year that we were in COVID, I was one who I volunteered. I just thought I'd try something different. I actually volunteered to teach online the full year, and this was right here. This was my setup. So I taught 20 feet from my bedroom. And, commute was great. And the kids, there were, I had 35 kids in my class, which was outrageous. If everybody handed in an essay or something, like, the marking for 35 was just a nightmare. But there were 25 kids who were just like right into it, and they did every single piece of work I gave them, and they were on every day, and their faces were up when I saw their faces. And there were 10 of them who just basically, like, I think they put they logged on to the meeting, and then they just turned their camera off and they just left the room. So the ones I had, the 25 who showed up were fantastic. The 10 who never showed up, what am I going to do about it anyways? So actually, it wound up being not that bad of an experience for me, but overall. But I was happy to get back. The following year, that's when I moved to Whitby. So I was still in Pickering before COVID, and I changed schools and got to Whitby here, which is a 12-minute door-to-door drive, which is much nicer than going to Pickering, because I live in Brooklyn. And I was very happy to get back in the classroom, and get face-to-face with kids again, even though it was a good experience to be online for a year, but a year was enough. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about you and your wife traveling. Is there one big destination other than St. Catharines in September 20th, 21st, 22nd, 2024 that you've got on the docket?
Well, we generally we tried to go to Europe once, like I said, once we both were sort of established and we're making our way up the pay grid in teaching. We tried to go to Europe at least every other year. And then as we kept moving up the grid and our salaries kept increasing, we started to go pretty much every year, either at March break or during the summer. We just were in the UK on March break, which is, kind of a strange destination for March break.
I was going to say, the weather must have been great.
It was actually, it never rained, and that's all you can hope for when you go to England, regardless of what time of year you go. As long as it's sunny, you're happy when you're in the UK. And we're going this summer. We've got planned 2 weeks, and we're doing Amsterdam, Brussels, and London. London has kind of become our number one city that we enjoy traveling to. There's just for a long time it was New York. We loved going to New York for a week here and there. But we've just found more things to do in London and more things that are sort of up our alley in London. And just London is just, we just love it. So we actually didn't go to London on March break. So we thought we'd have to tack that on to the Amsterdam, Belgium journey this summer. So we'll be in London this summer again, as well as with other two cities.
Amazing. And Mark, you'll be the only one wearing a half maroon, half blue jersey.
You should see if you could make one of those up for me.
Yeah, like with the M on one side and the B on another. It'll be great. Thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure your teammates would be looking forward to seeing you and old rivalries die hard. So I keep joking we're going to put on the worst exhibition of baseball ever, but I have a funny feeling that for some of us, the competitive juices will get flowing. And, you better tell Rob, not that there's any fear of me ever playing second base, but or being on second, but Rob Pino probably isn't going to want to try that with me. I'm just letting you know that. So really appreciate you telling us, some things that are a little bit different. See, you're still proudly wearing your Hibbing football, colors and flying that flag. And I think you're really doing the school proud by continuing to influence and lead young people as they make their way. So thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for getting this all together. I know I was talking about my uncles and dad earlier. They did oddly a 30-year reunion also for their softball team up in Cape Real against Sudbury. And they, not to this, we didn't have the podcast, but they did a reunion. It was very nice. Like, everybody enjoyed it greatly, and I think that this is going to be a great event this fall.
Yeah, it's funny when like a podcast is kind of like a conversation. So for me, I really am enjoying learning about the McMaster story because I would have heard it secondhand from Brad or Bill, and a little bit from Don Graves. But now it's really interesting to get the point of view of players. But, some of my Brock teammates I haven't talked to in, 27, 28, 29 years now. And to just get caught up it's like no time elapses whatsoever. It's like you're back in that dugout, freezing our asses off in 94, 95, 96. And, the last 30 years, just magically it washes away and you're there with that person again. So that's a really unique treasure that we all should embrace. And we look forward to seeing you. I'll look for the guy wearing the kilt because he's back from London or from the UK. Thanks so much, Mark. Have a great rest of this Easter Monday. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, the smell